I love apples, and a couple of years ago I came across one of the most delicious apple cake recipes I ever tried. It's the French apple cake recipe from the Once Upon a Chef food blog. The attributes that stand out to me the most about this cake recipe are the butteriness of the crumb and how it's such a perfect backdrop for the hearty pieces of soft Granny Smith apple, and how the dark rum masterfully brings together the mesmerizing, buttery tart sweetness of the cake. The cake's perfect sweetness level and fascinating texture immediately made this cake one of my favorites. The author wrote the recipe for conventional all-purpose wheat flour, but I've always used my gluten-free flour formula for the recipe, and no adjustments were needed for the volume measurements, the mixing method, or the specified baking time. Served plain or with a light dusting of powdered sugar, this cake instantly became a favorite in my house. After my third time making this French apple cake and eating it mostly unadorned, I started daydreaming about ways that I could make this already fantastic cake spectacular. One day I revisited my chocolate rum-caramel recipe to do some experimentation. And as I was tasting the results, something great dawned on me. One random thought led to another. Fall festivals, fair food, caramel apples, candied nuts, apple cake. I kept thinking about it over and over again for several weeks before this happened. Folding the tart, sweet Granny Smith apple pieces into the satiny silkiness of this batter is pure poetry in motion. This is my favorite part of baking a cake, portioning the perfectly made cake batter into the prepared pans. This is the final moment to take in the satisfying aroma of the raw cake batter and fresh apples. The excitement and anticipation of the victorious transformation from silky batter to velvety cake. The most exciting part of making this cake was navigating the challenge of successfully carrying the caramel flavor and texture all the way through the cake without overwhelming the delicate balance of apples to caramel. Conventional American buttercream is super sweet, and it would have been too sweet in my opinion to accompany the moderate sweetness of this apple cake itself. And this was my opportunity to add interesting variety to the texture profile. So I opted for a light and fluffy Swiss meringue buttercream. This whole endeavor was about joy and remembrance. Using my fine, panel-tested gluten-free flour formula, I was able to get completely immersed in the depths and complexities of the sensory vacation that I had imagined, without the threat of gritty, gummy, or strange, slimy textures, funny flavors, or off-putting aromas to rain on the occasion. I decided to whip some of my completely cooled chocolate rum salted caramel into the Swiss meringue buttercream so that I could taste a subtle hint of the caramel before getting to the apple cake itself. You can see here how adding the caramel to the frosting gave it a mesmerizing ivory-colored pearlescent sheen. To round out the whole gourmet caramel apple experience, I made a batch of English toffee-covered pecans and a batch of dark chocolate ganache. Watching the layering and filling process is where you can really get a feel for the satisfying complexity of the different textures and flavors in this cake. The rum, the chocolate, the salted caramel. You can see just how fluffy the chocolate rum salted caramel Swiss meringue buttercream is. Topped with a nice portion of crunchy toffee pecans and a glorious drizzle of the caramel. I started daydreaming about how I might make a luscious gourmet caramel apple into a stunningly unique and irresistible gluten-free cake. I kept thinking about it over and over again for several weeks before this happened. Starting out, I was just a little bit worried about how this part was going to look. But by the time I finished applying the caramel and ganache, I was super happy with the effect. Meet the Cardinal, a glorious gourmet chocolate rum-caramel apple imagined as an irresistible gluten-free cake. This gourmet gluten-free caramel apple cake is named after the 4 cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. It's a reminder that all great things take time. Start with yourself. Invest the time to get to know who you are. And stay true to your values. There are no shortcuts to success. There's a process and a flow. Follow the process and surrender to the flow of your highest inspiration. Build your foundations in truth and gratitude. Be optimistic. And when you get nervous, focus on service, and you'll create masterpieces that solve future problems. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.